is a great day to, full credit to the team who pulled this day together. We're here to talk about the potential of open source in Ireland, and also look at the potential for Ireland in open source. And I hope the stories I'll try to tell you over the next few minutes give you a sense as to the work that we're trying to do within the government. And I'm going to keep coming back to the theme of stories, because I'm not going to get into statistics. I'm not going to be trying to make an economic case. The case was made earlier on that we need to be able to explain what we're doing around open source. And so what I'm going to be trying to do is just tell a couple of stories, if you like, that talk about how we're trying to use open source to make for better public services. We're trying to look after people's well-being. We're trying to look after the planet's well-being. And we're doing that with what we're calling digital public infrastructure, also known as open source building blocks for government. And I think this is a good story to tell. And so I hope some of the elements here may be useful to you to share. And what I'm going to try to do is try to make it real, to show you how far we have got in a relatively short space of time to building out what I think are a set of building blocks and services that are hopefully going to be useful at a national level, or already becoming useful, but also have potential to be useful elsewhere in the world. So let me begin to do that. So as I start, so that's not mine.
Find out. Somebody's lost. It's probably
John's trying to find a phone.
Yeah, exactly.
As I begin, let me just say that I think we are at a moment in time that matters. This is a moment that matters, in a decade that matters, where there's a lot on the line. We have to try to tackle the many challenges that people face, and we know people are facing challenges in our country, across the continent, across the planet, and we also know the planet is facing challenges. So there's a lot on the line at this time. Our generation is one of the few generations that is very privileged to have got to where we're at, but also have a great responsibility to look after where we're at. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, as I said, and my story is I'll jump in here with it. I'm from a very traditional Irish medical family. So my grandparents were all doctors, and I went to medical school. And that's where my story began. But this is a story of another doctor, a physician called Dr. Peter Chamberlain, who's French-British. And he had a obstetric practice delivering babies in the 1600s in England. And he invented the forceps, which are used to deliver babies in difficulty. That's now widely used in obstetric practice. But he kept it a secret. He brought the forceps in and out to the bedside in a box that was kept uncovered, and he kept it hidden. And these were found later under the floorboards of a house. And when I heard that story first, I felt shame that a doctor could have done so much good for so many other people by sharing his work, but he chose to keep it to himself for his own fulfillment and aggrandizement. What has changed in medicine, and what has changed the world of medicine since then, is a culture of publish or perish. If you go to medical school, you're taught to contribute to the advancements of the science through publishing your literature. And I think we're at that moment in many ways in other disciplines where the idea that actually you would keep a secret that could be useful for others just to yourself and not be willing to share it, I think that story will ring true in the future in other domains. Here's another story. A guy called Malcolm McLean, an American businessman in the 1950s, saw how inefficient shipping was in New Jersey and decided that it was made much more sense if somebody would standardize the shipping container that were going in and out of ships. So he drafted a specification for a shipping container, and he saw that it was beginning to work. And he decided to make the specifications for that royalty-free available to the ISO group. And that standard for a shipping container changed the world of shipping and has changed our lives. because essentially now the cost of transportation of goods has fallen 36-fold by one man who shared his story, his work. My own story as an emergency physician, I spent 20 years doing emergency medicine, and I can tell you that the emergency departments of this country and of the Western world are struggling in large part because of dysfunctional, there are people and process issues, but there is a major issue with the health IT market. And I can say it because I worked within it for long enough, trying to change, to fix the electronic health record, and Gar knows that mission and vision. And if you want to know how bad it is, you need to just go to emergency rooms in the United States, where they have hired an industry of medical scribes to actually do something to try to support the doctors, because such is the poor usability of the health IT systems. So I began work, as part of my work, to then began to do work on something about that, and trying to learn how we might positively disrupt the market with building blocks for healthcare around usability and integration and data persistence. And I did that for a couple of years before I then came across this paper from the United Nations. I'm very glad that the UN are represented here today, because they have effectively shown us the way forward. This paper, the UNITU, talks about how all of government can invest in digital technologies towards the sustainable development goals. And they make the point that if you look at any sector, agriculture, health, education, or whatever, and you look deep down for the patterns, there are patterns at play. Generic workflows, generic building blocks that are required to change the world we live in. And that's where, for me, I began to think, okay, the mission or the vision I was having in terms of seeing the future of health IT, I think is definitely a broader one around government and public service. And I'll recommend a book, if you haven't heard of it before, called Done Economics. I recommend it all the time. It's got a couple of visuals in it that really changed my view of, if you're trying to understand the world we live in, it's one of the best books out there. And this talks about, we're on an earth, it's a society, and an economy that should be in service to society. And in that, there's 4 key players. There's the household, where you spend your day or your night. There's the market, which has been all important, and it certainly has been a huge change in all of our lives. In this country, we've seen amazing changes in our living standards. There's the role of the state, which is now recognized as being actually very vital. COVID, if anything, taught us that we have to have the state getting involved and taking a lead in some of these things some of the time. And then there's the role of the commons, which has been neglected for too long, but we are here as those of us interested in open source, interested in what I would call the digital commons. And so what we're all on, if you like, in terms of those of us in the public service who have an interest in open source, is building out digital public infrastructure using digital public goods, the building blocks of the future. The 21st century public services will be built this way. We are just at the beginning of that journey at this point in time. And if you look at this view from the Digital Impact Alliance and the work that's been done to actually take this approach, look at that map. What does that map tell you? It tells you that actually the leadership in this is in the global south. Some of us in the global north probably have too much money that has been wasted on other approaches. And the global south, to their credit, is taking the lead on taking these building blocks and making these work. And if you look at their view of the approach, there are only about 20, 25 building blocks that are required. And these are the building blocks that are in the commons and that actually are being used now to develop solutions across, and they can be used across sectors. This is a view from the Digital Impact Alliance. You will not find a catalogue like this in the European market, the US market, any other market, but it's there for the taking. This market that should be out there. So that's at an international level. Let me just then jump down then to European level to remind ourselves that actually Europe has declared this decade to be about 2 things. One is about a digital decade in terms of transforming public services with digital, and the other is to do it in a green and sustainable way for the planet. So what we're trying to do here in Dublin and in Ireland and across Europe is to try to achieve both of those goals. And it's a big ask, and it's a noble goal, and I think Ireland and the work we're doing here has the potential to be very helpful in that agenda. Okay, so I've talked about what's happening internationally and at a European level. Now, let me now bring it down to what we're doing at a national level. So the department that I'm based in, which is now known as the Department of Public Expenditure, the Public Sector Services, Public Service Reform, I should say, Infrastructure and Digitalisation, my name got changed in the last week or two, has got an agenda around better public services, which is about transforming services for the better of the public. And the number one pillar there is digital innovation at scale. It's about tackling big issues, driving big change, and achieving a seamless user experience in a dynamic and an agile way. The way we're going about that is we're tackling that through what's called a life events approach. And this isn't unique to Ireland. Other governments are doing this, which is they're saying, how can we help people from cradle to grave, from the birth of a child to the death of a loved one, and all those other important life events in between where you need help from the government or from the public sector. And so we recognise these as common needs for people across organisational boundaries. What we're doing then, which is kind of, I think, almost unique, but open to be corrected on this, is we're taking a life events approach to the challenge, but using a building block approach to the building of the related solutions to do that. And so if you want to have a look at what we're doing, if you like, in the last 12 months, our focus has been around on these life events, analysing how these life events could and should be better supported. At the bottom you see a push around digital services or professional services in terms of data protection, legislation, communication, etc. And then in the middle the building blocks, about 10 of them which we've identified from the GovStack, a catalogue that we think are the game changers. And I'm going to quickly step you through those. To call out the way we're doing that, which might be of interest, we've established 5 pillars in the digital services unit that I lead around competencies that we want the civil service, public service to be better and good at. One is around policy analysis and business analysis. Another is around design and content. We think design is a really important capability and capacity we need to build. Then around applications and architecture, that again we should be expert in that in the public service and know good practice there. Then about assurance, it really wants to make sure that security is okay, etc. And then good operations. And I'm pleased to say that we've got 3 effectively Irish companies really that are working with us on that, who are represented here today. And we're also working with colleagues in Microsoft and AWS, etc., to help us get this vision realised. Okay, so just to quickly run you through the components, because it makes it easier if I show you. Seeing is believing, as they say. So first up is a design system. We believe an important principle is to make sure it's a consistent look and feel for everybody as they come across government. We're simply inheriting and using good practice from elsewhere here. GovUK has led the world in terms of its good practice in this area. So this is a fork of the GovUK design system that we're customising for Ireland. This one I might dwell on for a minute. This is our life events and digital wallet development. So we've developed these applications as the central element here, where on the left you can see somebody's logged into the life events portal. They've got their name and identity number is there, their PPSN. On the left you can see the orientation around the birth to death, and then we're focusing there on the driving event. The idea here is that for each life event that's important, generally speaking, whether you need to renew or apply for an application or whatever that is, generally there's a digital credential to go with that. So for each of the life events, we're generally seeing a good match with something in the digital wallet. And on the wallet, you can see the digital wallet that we've developed, which is effectively where the credentials will be then stored. And we're doing this in a way, actually, we're trying to make sure it's interoperable at a national level. We're doing work with GAR and HSE on the interoperability between our app and the HSE Health app. And we're also doing work at a European level to make sure we're interoperable with the European Digital Wallet Standard. But just to run you through the other building blocks, and by the way, I should call out here that the principal approach that we talk about within government is what's called our build to share model. That's not new, that's been around for 5 to 10 years, but essentially this is building on our government networks, our government infrastructure, and now government applications. So Gov.ie is moving to a CMS framework that Ireland.ie and citizen information .ie and HSE.ie are already on, which is Wagtail, which is an open source CMS solution that we're building on. MyGovID is a building block that's vital for our government, and the Department of Social Protection run this one. It's compliant to the OpenID standards. So this is just effectively a standards-based approach to authentication that department stands behind. We are doing work on a forms engine. This has been, again, inherited from the Singaporean government. They have Forms SG. This is effectively a drag and drop tool for digitizing the thousands of forms that are out there. Again, this has been done in collaboration with the HSE. Again, we have a common code base there. And again, that's now in active use. We've got a payments building block. So the idea here is, again, inspired by GovUK payments, or GovUK Pay, I think they call it, essentially where we're essentially offering a common method and look and feel for any public service that needs to capture a payment and be able to be compliant with Stripe or Relex or WorldPay. And then we've got a messaging building block. The idea here is, again, lots of messaging notification needs to go out to the public, and that may be in an email or an SMS form, and we've got the methods to do that now. Again, that's based, again, inspired by the GovUK Notify system, so that's now moving into active use. We've got an e-case system which is built with .NET technology by one of our company, Storm, which is effectively a generic case management system. So if you can imagine, the user's logged in, they fill out a form, they want something, they need something, we have to have some process at the back for civil or public servants to say, yay, they're entitled, or no, they're not. And this is that kind of case management tool, which has been being built out at the moment. And then we've got Information Mediator, which is effectively the key vital building block that joins all the other building blocks together where necessary, but also as an interface outside to government departments, and indeed to the European Union and others where we need to get data in and out. This is based on Apache Camel, again another open source building block. We're using generic open source technology for analytics and business intelligence purposes. These are Prometheus and Grafana, but there's obviously other options there, but this is to satisfy the need people have in the exec corridors for the ability to look at the numbers there. And then I'll just slow down for a minute to talk about the work we're doing in three key areas. So one is on AI. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI here today, and a lot of interest in AI. What we've been trying to do is politely push back on the notion that we should just turn on ChatGPT and just, that sorts all our AI problems out. That's not the way we think to do it. We think we need to understand what's happening under the hood in scientific terms, and try to understand, what are the key core services that we need to run across the public service that then other people can build on. And if you look at that, you end up kind of concluding about things like search, summarization, indexing, translation, etc. And so there's an interest, I think, growing, and today helps that, in trying to see how we can foster a core set of AI-based services using open source as much as possible, which I think is important from a data sovereignty point of view, digital sovereignty point of view, and try to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel all over the place by focusing on those couple. And one that might stand out, which has been led by Údarás na Gaeltachta, which is our Irish language body in Galway, is around the Irish language translation. So the idea that we would end up with a digital public good to support English-Irish translation is something that we're trying to support them with. But I think what we are coming to the point at, and certainly today helps me see that actually what we need to do is set up a community of practice around AI in the public service and beyond, and the Open Arm Network may be well placed to help us with that, because I think we want to just try to encourage good practice and collaboration in that area. The next area, again, to talk about where there could be a community practice is around application development. We are, as I've talked to you about, not trying to build a monolith. We're trying to build a critical number of building blocks that then operate in a federation to allow us to serve the user's needs, be they citizens or civil service, It respects the legacy systems that are out there in terms of we can integrate with existing systems. We're not talking about ripping and replacing. We have our information mediator there that allows us to do that, as well as to connect out to the European Union, etc. But just the whole practice of development and operations is something that would be good for us to share good practice around. And it would be good, again, to see a community of practice emerging around that. And I think Mark from GitHub or Robert may have a view on how we might do that. And then just lastly to talk about this idea of vendor neutral infrastructure. So Louise mentioned the work that they're doing on OpenShift containers. We have the same strategy. We are trying to make sure that we can work on premise where we need to, but also with AWS and Microsoft and others where necessary, by putting a vendor neutral container layer into the mix. And that's working well, and I think it serves us well in terms of trying to make sure we're vendor neutral there as much as we possibly can do. And just finally, to bring you up to date as to where we're at, so we do have a digital wallet. I have it on my phone. We have built it out. We started with a pilot of 50 civil servants in December 23. Last July, we ended up with a launch to 1,000 public servants, which got uptake of about 600 in the end. But essentially, we got into their hands the government digital wallet. They were able to log in with MyGovID and get access to their credentials in terms of a MyGovID and digital driving license. The idea here is that we're following the EU spec to make sure it's privacy enhancing. So the idea, and we're very much kind of being very careful with this, is that the same credential could be used by the guard, policeman at the side of the road to get access to your driving license. But if you need to go into a pub or a nightclub and you don't want to share any of your personal details, the same credential can be just prove you're over 18. And then somewhere in the middle, if you need to prove your name or address for opening a bank account or getting insurance, then you could use the same credential for that as well. So we are at the stage here where we've built the technology. What's holding us back from launch at the moment would be issues around the data protection, as you can imagine, and the legislation. There is a legislative block that basically says a digital driving license isn't recognised by the guards at the side of the road at the moment. People still have to bring their license into the Garda station. So we're hoping the new minister, who we met when he was Minister of Transport, will help us unblock this legislation this year, and we're hoping to get a beta launch to the public later this year on getting this into people's hands. So that brings you up to date with where we're at, if you like, with our building out of digital public infrastructure. It's getting very real now. We have built a lot of these essential building blocks, and they're now getting into active use. As I say, we hopefully are only months away from getting digital wallet into people's hands. There's a couple of challenges. You've already heard mention of the kind of issues around culture and people and process and technology. And what we're not suggesting for a moment is that this is the only way things have been done in the public sector. It's not. But what we're trying to do is begin to show that actually there's value here in this user-centered and agile development and open source methods, and hopefully that method will grow. And then essentially, the opportunity, I guess, that comes with that is that if we can get greater collaboration going, and again, you'll be talking, about the work we're doing, together on things like forms and digital wallet interoperability. There's a great opportunity here to get much more, better public services together if we can work together on some of this mission. So, that's it in summary. We are trying to think about how we can impact the well-being of the people by improving their digital public services, giving them a better experience, making it more seamless for them, making it more efficient. Hopefully that will make, if we support their lives in a better way in terms of those life events, that will make their lives better. We hope by doing it in this open source way for reuse and recycling, that helps in a more sustainable way. And we think that, we believe Europe, could learn, and we could find ourselves in a situation where we are one of the few European countries who are taking the lead on doing it this way. So I think that puts us in a pretty good position. So I'll just close there by saying, I do think, we are at this moment that matters. I do think that there's a lot on the line at the moment, but there is a great opportunity here. If we can get our hands around this challenge together and bring this together, bring some of the solutions together to try to bridge that gap that's there at the moment and meet those needs, then there's a lot we can be proud of and look forward to. I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much.